Hey, Survivor fans. Original winner Richard Hatch. Please enjoy this season retrospective from Reality Art Pod. And keep watching my YouTube videos to keep up with me whenever I can get them posted. That Borneo was a stressful time, but what a beautiful place and what a great game. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, it's Chenzo from Reality Art Pod, here with my complete retrospective looking back at Survivor. Season 1, we're going back to Borneo 25 years later. I started this a while ago and finally finished it over time. Now I've gone back and revamped some of it. If you're new to the channel, I do weekly Survivor recaps. So if you like this content, consider liking and subscribing. Check out the library of Survivor videos on my page. My videos aren't meant to replace the original material, so if you never watched this season, I put a link below to get started with the Paramount Plus subscription for free. But let's get started taking it back to the year 2000 for episode 1 titled The Marooning. So let's dive into it. Jeff announces that they're going on an adventure of a lifetime and they sail out in rickety little boats to a bigger sailboat for no reason. There's chaos on the boat and Jeff is being tossed around by the castaways who are scrambling with
2 minutes to salvage whatever they can off this boat.
So they get on their rafts, it's still chaos, and the tribes will be Orange Tagi and Yellow Pagong. They get introduced one by one with little shots of them drowning, then shots of them at home peacefully doing occupations. I like the little headshots and wish they still did that. Jeff says,
Hard to imagine that just 4 hours ago, this group met for the first time.
I don't think that's hard to imagine at all. They still haven't spoken, but okay. They had to paddle a far way here with the boat being shown in the far distance as they pull up to shore. They're probably exhausted. Sean pats Dirk on the ass to celebrate getting to shore.
Hard to imagine that just 4 hours ago, this group met for the first time.
Tensions rise right away with Rudy calling the group
dumb.
And Kelly saying,
he may be 72 years old and an ex-Navy SEAL. That doesn't mean that this is his world.
Kelly seems quickly committed to not cutting her elderly veteran peer a break. Some folks want to get organized, but others have bigger priorities.
Can we piss first?
At Pagong, the camera people are focused on Ramona looking tired on the raft, throwing up her water, head down exhausted. Ramona takes a break lying in a pile of supplies. They really try to edit Ramona out to be a lazy person, but truly laying in a pile of wreckage is so funny. I feel like Ramona has a great sense of humor and they really missed an opportunity to make this hilarious. Back at Tagi, they're still debating what to do first, with everyone having a different idea. Richard chimes in, sitting up in a tree, trying to mediate.
Rich, I appreciate what he's trying to do and I think he's got some good skills, and unfortunately people like that annoy me.
Sue and Rich have a deep conversation about their different approaches.
I'm a redneck, and corporate world ain't gonna work out here in the bush.
So basically, Rich is trying to get everyone organized, and everyone else seems pretty committed to being messy. Rich confesses that he's confident he's gonna win, he just needs to figure out,
How do I get there from here?
Later, Rich sits everyone down and teaches them how to communicate. Then they have a montage all working together nicely. At Pagong, Bibi and Ramona go on a seemingly miles-long hike to find the water well. They end up finding it, but why does it have to be so far away? Bibi suggests to Ramona that they use their knowledge of the water's location and holding the map hostage as leverage to keep them from being voted out, and I wish that they would have gone through with this. They have their first night sleeping outside with snakes and rats both making featured appearances at camp. In the morning, Rudy works out and is wishing he was the leader.
If they listen to me, they'd all have haircuts. We'd be in formation in the morning. All that kind of stuff.
They talk about Sean's nipple ring, and Sue cuts her hair with a knife because she felt some knots. But they've literally been there for one night, and she is hacking her hair out of her head. Sonia is hurt. We don't know why, but she's fully bleeding, and Sean is running triage because he's a doctor. Sean also tries to use a knife as a machete, and it breaks and snaps back, and he truly could have hurt himself with that. Luckily for them and us, Sonia has a ukulele, and she sings a great little ditty for Richard called Bye Bye Blues that is one of the great Survivor musical moments.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Rich tells us that they got rat traps in the marooning and they caught multiple rats that they plan to eat. Poor ratties. Over at Pagong, Bibi is trying to lead the shelter building. Joel says he thinks Bibi doesn't like him, which is projecting talk, meaning Joel doesn't like Bibi. Everyone is being lazy and Bibi seems to be the only person working all day. If I were there, I'd help Bibi. Gretchen offers to help Bibi and encourages him to take a break. Later, Bibi oversees Gretchen making the first ever Survivor fire. Dirk on Tagi scrapes wood together obsessively until he gives up exhausted. Then Then Jeff personally delivers their first tree mail, telling them they'll be competing for reward and immunity at their first challenge, which they head to. At the challenge, Jeff tells them they'll be competing for 50 waterproof matches and the immunity idol, which is I guess a tiki of some kind, and this thing is pretty massive. For their challenge, Quest for Fire, they simply enough need to take their raft from the water to the shore, lighting torches along the way. The only real rule is that they all have to keep their hand on the raft at all times. This challenge is pretty boring to watch. It's just a foot race. The only notable thing that happens is poor Sonia falls down. She's so committed to the challenge that she holds onto the raft and doesn't let go. Her tribe keeps dragging her face down through the water. Is this Sonia's fault for falling or theirs for dragging her? Because Sonia fell, Pagong gets to a lead, and this challenge probably only lasted like 2 or 3 minutes in real life because before you know it, Pagong wins immunity, meaning that someone at Tagi will be the first person voted out of Survivor. The next day at Tagi, Dirk has an emotional moment where he's praying on the beach with his Bible as people look for him. It was odd that they didn't include a confessional from Dirk at this moment at all. Rudy confesses he's changed his opinion on Rich from his first impression.
You know, he's fat, but he's good.
Rich will be called fat multiple times this season, and I think is probably the only person on Survivor to get called fat multiple times. This is toxic body shaming. They get ready for their first tribal. Rich feels like he may be voted out, but Sonia says,
I really feel responsible. I was dragged totally off my feet.
We don't get to see much strategizing, but we hear from Stacy that she, Kelly, and Sue are going to vote together. Sue tells us that Stacy wants her to vote for Rudy, but she's not down.
The chicks think I'm voting for one person and I'm not.
So Sue is totally lying to Stacy for no real reason. As they walk to tribal, Jeff voiceovers pretty much laying out that it'll either be Rich or Sonia voted out, which is weird because Rich ends up getting no votes and 2 other people not mentioned get votes. At tribal, Jeff asks Sonia how she's doing and she says she's all banged up and asks them what happened after the challenge, and he gets no real answer. This tribal ends up just being Jeff talking at them and explaining how voting works. They get to voting and Sue casts the first ever vote for Sauna, terribly misspelling Sonia. Rich votes for Stacy, citing
subtle reasons. Not sure exactly what they are.
Stacy votes for Rudy.
He just criticizes everything.
Rudy votes for Sonia.
She's the reason we lost yesterday.
And Sonia votes for Rudy. In the end, Sonia is voted out by a 4-3-1 vote, with Rudy getting 3 and Stacy 1 from Rich. I remember this vote off being especially painful to me as a kid watching this. I screamed, Sonia, no, why? Not my Sonia-licious, not my baby. And Sonia is an icon, someone who was really loved by her tribe, singing her cute song, and she had 3 people on the tribe not vote for her in Rich, Kelly, and Stacy. She and Rich had a real bonding moment over her song, so he probably knew which way things were going and threw a stray at Stacy. If he'd had voted for Rudy, I think the rules for a tie on this season were that Rudy and Sonia would have had to do a physical challenge, which would have been not fun to watch, and Sonia probably still goes home there. Ultimately, falling in the challenge was her undoing because it truly cost her tribe the challenge, and at this point, for all they knew, it's a foot race every week. Since I originally recorded this episode, Sonia sadly passed away in April of 2024. She remained a huge fan of the show, and even till then, never missed an episode. We love you, Sonia. Absolute legend. Moving forward to episode 2, titled The Generation Gap, it's the next day at the Tagi tribe, who are hungry and eating rats. Rudy is surprisingly not down to eat the rats. We learn that Stacy thinks that Rudy voted for her, but it was Rich. This adds more fuel to Stacy's vendetta against Rudy, and she tells us that she, Kelly, and Sue are over Rudy being rude. Because of Rudy's overeating, the ladies have confiscated the canned food at camp, not allowing anyone to touch it unless the whole group decides. Rudy doesn't like Stacy either.
If we were friends on the outside, I'd definitely avoid her.
Over at Pagong, Jenna praises BB's work ethic and he's helping them to build a god-tier shelter. Colleen appreciates him but is also annoyed by him.
I think he's a little bit out of his element. He doesn't know how to fix it without being a little bit aggressive.
And BB holds Greg up by only his hair and his shorts for him to do the slightest task that anyone standing could do. BB praises
Gretchen, Craig, and I can't think of the lady's name in the pink swimming suit, but she works her heart out.
Ramona calls BB a workaholic. BB makes the group chopsticks, but they're all still rubbed the wrong way by him.
If we were to ever lose, I think he'd probably be the first one voted off.
At Tagi, Rudy is helping out more and more and offers to cook for everyone. Richard points out,
if he knew I were gay, that would be really difficult for him, I think. I think it would just freak him.
Which leads them to have the first really provocative conversation for the time where Sean says,
you're not homosexual, you're gay.
No, I'm homosexual. I mean, do we not like to be called that?
No, because
it's a lifestyle.
Right.
And,
well...
Rudy tells us that Rich tried to come out to him.
He said, you want to talk? I says, no, I don't want to talk. He was going to tell me he was queer then.
It's honestly crazy that Rudy refers to Rich as
the homosexual. He's one of the nicest guys I ever met.
This whole segment is painting Rich and Rudy out to be unlikely friends, but obviously nobody talks like this anymore, and I can't judge these conversations on today's standards because nobody was having these conversations at home or on TV at this time, so there was no rubric for them to judge themselves against.
Me and Richard got to be pretty good friends, not in a homosexual way, that's for sure. I don't know what my buddies are going to say when I get home. I'll have to deal with that.
But honestly, props to Rudy for being this age at this time and being so open-minded. At Pagong, Ramona is having trouble with being sick and offering her portions to the others. She wants to overcompensate by drinking more water. Ramona is dry heaving. She's obviously very sick, and we don't see people get sick like this anymore or often. BB calls Ramona lazy, saying,
she probably hasn't worked 10 or 15 minutes in 5 days. I think she's really a drag.
I don't love the portrayal of Ramona as lazy when she's clearly actually very sick, and Ramona doesn't either. After the show, she would come forward saying she felt her castmates on the show painted her with racial stereotypes as being the lazy person. I would actually encourage everyone to listen to the Rob Has a Podcast, Black Voices of Survivor Roundtable, where Ramona joined up with other Black survivors to share their experiences and speak on this better than I ever could. I'll put a link to that video in the description. At Pagong, BB is a delight.
I think they find me abrasive, authoritarian. I don't care. I just want to make my life here as comfortable as possible and then get the hell off.
We start a new storyline with Ramona noticing that Colleen and Greg sneak off together, and even as a kid, I always felt like it was insinuated that they're sneaking off into the woods to hook up, but it really seems like they're just being silly and adventuring.
She's rough and ready.
This is like actually making a friend out
I
here.
mean, they were gone for like an hour, and we have no idea where they're gone, what they've done.
That night, they play a game called the all-new Newly Stranded game. Greg is making everyone laugh, and Ramona appreciates him. In the morning, Gretchen is frustrated with BB because he wanted to build the shelter near the water, and the tide is coming up to the shelter, so they have to move the whole shelter up towards the trees. BB is defensive about it and lashing out. He refuses to sleep up towards the trees for no good reason. He's snippy with everyone, especially Joel.
If the sky was blue, he'd say it was red just to disagree.
And he tells Joel that he will take his feedback into account only if they were building a health facility. What's that supposed to mean? At Tagi, Sean makes a pretty impressive fishing pole, complete with reel and lure. Sue is not impressed.
Oh no, it's not a waste of time. Well, did you catch any fish? No.
Maybe the area is overfished or something.
Back at Pagong, BB starts washing his shirt in the pot of water that they're planning to cook in. BB and Jervis have a fight.
I've been working my ass off, and a lot of you have been laying on your ass watching.
You didn't take one trek in this jungle yet. Your ass been sitting down here chilling.
They get tree mail inviting them to the first annual Starving Survivors Benefit Buffet. BB floats the idea of throwing the challenge to Gretchen.
I think we ought to consider whether we even want to win it. Because I think
Yes,
we ought
we want to win it.
Because I think we ought to think about lightening the load here.
Here, BB lays the groundwork for the self-engineered quit that we still see today. They all try to talk BB off the ledge. They head to their immunity challenge where they have to face off eating beetle larvae, and the rules are that the first person who refuses to eat one loses immunity for the whole tribe. Those rules are so whack. Jervis is first and really is struggling with it and almost loses this for his whole tribe. He completes it but doesn't spare us the dramatics. Everyone else makes it look easy, and then they go to a tiebreaker where they each have to pick the weakest member of the other team to face off. The tribes pick Stacy and Jervis to face off, and they have to eat 2 bugs each. The first to finish their bugs wins immunity for the tribe, and they take off. Jervis doesn't hesitate, but Stacy still beats Jervis and impresses her tribe. Back at Pagong, they get ready for tribal with Ramona expressing that she's worried she'll be voted out, but she seems in a lot better health on this day, and she helped the team in the challenge by eating her bug. Jenna confesses that she thinks they should keep BB because he helped them with their shelter, even though he was the reason they had to move the shelter and is being a royal pain in the ass. Gretchen and Colleen are shown being emotional about this decision. At Tribal Council, I've got to commend Jeff because it's his first week at work at a new job and he's rizzing it up. Truly, he's engaging, authentic, and comfortable. He already knows all of his lines. In their discussions, Colleen gives credit for their shelter to strong leadership. Jervis feels like he let the tribe down in the challenge. They don't talk about anything else and get straight to the votes. Gretchen says she's voting for BB because he asked to be voted out. Greg sniffs his marker and votes for Ramona. BB ends up voted out by a vote of 6-2, with he and Greg voting for Ramona, so we have to say goodbye to BB here, who had a really great work ethic and seems like he applied to the show with the mindset of building the best shelter and creating a thriving economy in the jungle, but not everyone was on his wave, especially with some of his Pagong tribe members, more being in it for for the vibes experience. I actually think if you swap BB and Sonia on the initial tribes, they both fit in better with the other tribe. I feel like his tribe saw him as a really annoying uncle, but they did respect him and did have a lot of patience to deal with him. Judging on how emotional the women were the day of this vote off, and the fact that Greg still voted to keep him, I really do believe that if he didn't ask to be voted out, the women of the tribe would have kept him for one more round and voted out Ramona, and he would have stayed by a 5-3 vote. After the show, he would go back to his construction job and family and passed away 13 years later. Rest in peace to BB. He did a lot in these 2 episodes. Moving on to episode 3, titled Quest for Food. Sunrise at Tagi brings a new day and the survivors are hungry and trying to fish.
Fishing is horrible. There's a lot of fish in the sea, not this sea. There is nothing to be caught out there.
No luck so far.
Sue, Kelly, and Stacy are on the raft talking mad shit about Rudy.
When was the last time Rudy went on a water run?
What are you doing this for? Good morning, Rudy. How are you doing? You're wasting your time out there. Damn. Morning to you, too.
Sue tells Stacy and Kelly that she's going to vote for the person who's not helping them at the next tribal council. Sue is being shady here because she's talking about Stacy to her face. Sue thinks she's being sly, but Stacy is onto her.
I'm gonna get rid of the weakest member and vote Stacy out.
Now I don't trust her as far as I can throw her, which according to the group would be not far.
Over at Pagong, they're hungry too. As they search for food, Gretchen, Greg, and Colleen find a farting mud volcano and decide to play in it, and the others join them to cover themselves in mud from head to toe. At Tagi, Dirk is reading from his Bible and preaching to the tribe and clearly rubbing people the wrong way.
But when Christ came, he opened the door to every human being on earth.
I can only take so much preaching. Yeah, Dirk's about driving me wild with that.
Hard pivot to a new storyline that Dirk also has a crush on Kelly that he kind of admits to.
Stacy came up to me. Yeah, I think he likes you.
Kelly's got a serious boyfriend. Unless she tells me otherwise, that's a line I'm not going to cross.
I think he's really sexually frustrated.
Dirk says he's a virgin, and Sue encourages him to
try it sometime.
Then some routine homophobia.
Homosexual people talk about their homosexuality all the time, and it's really annoying to me. If we could cut that out, it'd almost be perfect around camp.
The tribes head to their reward challenge, where Pagong does an extended conga line, and the miserable Tagis who have been squabbling about their religious beliefs all day walk in normal. The reward challenge is a race to win a fishing spear. They'll be swimming out to an inner tube, going underwater and pushing a submerged chest. The first tribe to get their chest back to shore wins the reward. They race out and Tagi gets to their chest first, and they maintain their lead for the whole challenge, eventually winning the fishing gear, with them finally lightening up and having a little fun in their celebration. Back at Tagi, Rich heads out with the spear and Sean totally underestimates him, saying Rich won't catch anything, and Sean goes off about how great his Super Pole 2000 is. Sean and Dirk are on a mission to emasculate Richard with this big pole.
If I was a little fish and I saw Rich swimming at me, I wouldn't be sticking around long. Big gay man with a spear.
Meanwhile, they don't look cool, and Richard looks awesome using his spear and successfully catching a stingray.
This is a pretty good moment for me. People were thinking I was just full of caca.
Rich makes a comment that he feels vindicated because he's been talking to his tribe about what he's been doing his whole life, so I googled it and he actually majored in oceanography and marine biology in college. Sean doesn't want to give Rich credit, saying that the rays that he caught don't look delicious and they don't look enough like fish for his liking.
Finally, when I came up with a third one, they said, good job, good job.
But the women are loving Rich for this.
We got fish!
Watch the spear!
And Rich purposefully falls into the provider role.
You just need to keep me, and I'll provide you with all the fish you need.
The next day at Pagong,
You heard a rumor that the other team caught fish with their spear.
so did production come over and say, hey you guys, you suck, the other tribe's catching fish, you have to eat? Jenna is hungry.
Oh, I'm so ready to eat rat. I want to gut him, bone him. We're going to have like some little rat meat.
And they're trying to catch rats at night, and Greg makes a pretty impressive rat trap, the likes of which we've never seen again. He catches a rat, and there's lots of shots of dead rats and them cooking the rats. It's really gross. Ramona asks Joel what the rat tastes like.
Almost like chicken a little bit. Use your imagination.
Am I using a lot of imagination?
Ramona and Jervis try rat, and they play music like they're in a horror movie, but they end up liking it.
What do you think?
We got to kill some more rats tonight.
For their next challenge, they have to choose their smallest member and build a stretcher, and it's obvious they're going to be carrying their player. At Tagi, Stacy continues to have a bug up her butt about Rudy.
We all have our individual strengths. It's just if we could get Rudy out of here.
They build a little stretcher and carry Kelly's lifeless, limp body up and down the beach. They seem prepared. Pagong does the same and even makes it so they can flip Colleen over. She's strapped to this thing like Hannibal Lecter. Jeff casually walks in next to a downed plane. I guess this is a remnant from World War II. No context for the plane, though I'm sure someone died. Unmentioned death is our entertainment though, because they're running a cute little scenario where they need to rescue their survivor from the plane wreckage and bring them to safety in a race for immunity. The survivors jet into the jungle to find their tribe mates who are screaming at the top of their lungs. Pagong ends up winning this, just being faster in general, and Colleen, who did nothing, goes apeshit in her stretcher. Tagi head back in shame to strategize, and Pagong celebrate on what I'll call Pride Rock. Back at Tagi, Rudy says it's he or Stacy tonight, and
I'm gonna vote Stacy out because I don't like her, and I never will.
Sue wants to vote for Stacy because she's the weakest. On the way to Tribal, Kelly makes an iconic proclamation.
I don't think anybody's out here to make friends. I'm not out here to make friends.
With this being the first time this was ever said on reality TV. At this Tribal, Jeff announces that they're doing things differently this time, introducing the conch shell of truth, where if they're holding the conch shell, they have to be completely honest. Rich instantly takes this ridiculous conch and makes a mockery of it.
Have at it, Richard.
Keep me, I'm getting the fish.
The conch is really an excuse for Jeff to grill the players, asking Sean if he's threatened by Rich for getting food. It starts raining, so they start hurrying things along. Stacy makes one last conch plea, saying the game is coming up on her strong point. Did the players have an idea that a merge was coming? They get to the votes and it's all very rushed, probably because the cameras are obviously getting wet and flickering. Everyone is drenched and miserable, even the votes are getting wet. Jeff reads the votes that are about to dissolve, and by a vote of 5-2, Stacy is voted off the tribe, with Stacy and Kelly having voted for Rudy. Because of the rain, she doesn't even have a flame to put out. Jeff awkwardly snuffs her anyway. Jeff invites the tribe to sleep at tribal council to stay dry or just not to have to walk back in the rain. So we have to say goodbye to Stacy here, who's probably the most forgettable person on this cast, despite providing a good deal of drama to the 3 episodes she was in, with her creating the first ever doomed girl alliance with Sue and Kelly, technically the first alliance on the show ever, not realizing that Sue secretly hated her and never planned to vote with her. She had a rivalry with Rudy, with them never seeing eye to eye, and even on the way out, she calls him a fumbling food thief. The reasons they give for voting her out are that she's the weakest, but she doesn't really look the weakest, or even ever really do anything to prove that she's weak. With her doing well in every challenge, even beating Jervis and eating bugs in clutch position, after being voted out at Ponderosa, Stacy found out that apparently producer Mark Burnett had told Dirk and Sean to vote her out over Rudy, as losing Rudy and having all the older people being voted out in a row would be a bad look and cost them older viewers. At the time, she was a lawyer, so she sued CBS for manipulating the game, and they ended up settling the dispute out of court, so Stacy might have been the big winner here after all. Stacy lives in San Francisco now and is still practicing law. At the time, this legal drama definitely had people questioning the reality of Survivor, but I do feel like the lawsuit prevented future production interference, which is good. Which leads to episode 4 titled Too Little Too Late. The survivors are dealing with the aftermath of the rainstorm. At Pagong, they're dealing with being wet and with sand fleas. Gretchen tells us she went through 6 years of Air Force survival school. She was the instructor, so she's a really cool addition to this cast. Gretchen is frustrated because the tribe is a mess. They're going against the rules of survival, and I could see where she's coming from given her background. She's especially frustrated with Joel.
Joel wants to take over, and that's fine, but Joel doesn't know about where we're going to be the most comfortable. I just can't let this go on anymore.
You want to vote me off? Fine, but we got to organize this.
Gretchen is direct with the tribe, and it does achieve her goal in getting them to move their shelter. On a lighter note,
hold on one second. Greg talks into a coconut and thinks it's a phone.
Yeah, just hold my calls.
Gretchen says that Greg is subtly manipulating the group and is really the leader. Over at Tagi, Sue is working overtime to find the
Tapioca.
Gotta find the tapioca.
Then they juxtapose Sue working hard to find food and Sean spending the day building a bowling alley, really painting Sean to be a time-wasting fool.
Sean's telling me looking for nuts is a waste of time. At least you know you can find a nut. You could have been all getting nuts or tapioca during the day. I'm tired of feeding people that don't do anything.
For their reward challenge, tribes are told they need to create a distress signal on the beach, and whoever's is the most eye-catching will win some parachuted supplies. Jenna and Dirk check out the supplies, which I guess are sponsored by Target, and they each get to request an item to go in the box. Jenna requests a spice rack, and Dirk wants a knife. Jeff gives them clues, and Jenna puts her clue in her top, which is kind of funny, and I'm like, is Jenna funny? It's been 4 episodes, and this is the first thing she's done that I noticed. At Pagong, they strategize. Survival expert Gretchen suggests a big bonfire, and Colleen responds outwardly, disrespectfully.
I
bump it,
But I'm
bump
saying,
it.
you do the fire, but you can't.
Colleen and Greg want to do a sex sells approach.
We're trapped on a desert island, you know, we're horny.
At Toggy, a similar debate.
The ideas I didn't like were just maybe a little bit tasteless, you know, and don't have much class.
Condoms, and they were different colored. That would be so funny.
I don't know if that has much class.
With the little orange thingies on your wieners.
Sean is really asserting his idea that they should do something big, which forces Rich to get sassy with him.
Doing a float or, you know, or something like that. Do you think I was done with my sentence?
Rich tells us that he's going to use the disagreements about the challenge to form alliances to benefit himself. Back at Pagong, Ramona is still struggling from the rain from the previous episode.
I can't do any more than I can do.
Every chance she got, she was just making it worse.
Jervis pulls Ramona aside and gives her a great pep talk and encourages her. The next morning, the tribes finalize their distress signals, with Ramona contributing more.
I'm feeling better, therefore I'm working more and harder. Like I've started to assert myself. I guess it's a combination.
It seems like Jervis's pep talk really helped her. And Greg talks to the pilot of the plane on his coconut phone.
Yeah, we're all on island time. Yeah. I don't want to tell you exactly what it looks like. Just put it this way, we're all very excited to be here.
The judges of the challenge are the pilot, the drop master, and Jeff Probst himself. They fly over Toggy, who spell out Toggy is groggy in the sand, and are making a star out of themselves wearing rain jackets. Pagong has made a big smiley face, which isn't really as sexy as I thought theirs was going to be, but maybe that's sexy at this time. They decide that Toggy incorporating colorfully dressed human bodies makes them the winners, dropping them the reward and flying by Pagong to let them know that they lost.
Man, I wanted garlic.
Toggy opens their reward with weirdly no mention of Target's name. Nobody says thanks, Target. Later, Kelly explains,
The whole idea of an alliance is to make sure we're all voting the same way.
with Kelly and Sue wanting to bring Rich into their alliance and vote together as a 3. Even though Kelly was just talking bad about Rudy last episode, now she likes Rudy enough to try to recruit him, but Rudy doesn't like the idea of alliances, so they don't want to make it an official 4. Back at Pagong, some more Jenna content, with Ramona pointing out that Jenna has a lot of energy. And Ramona says she hasn't had a white friend since middle school.
I really can see her being my first white friend in a long time.
Which was a cute moment, and Ramona's having fun with the whole group and working harder, but it's a bummer when Jenna tells us it's
A little too late.
And oops, she said the thing, but oh. And Ramona goes on to work and work and work.
Hopefully everyone sees like, wow, this is what 100% Ramona can offer to the team.
Their immunity challenge is a relay race with 5 legs. They need to assign different roles with the big goal of retrieving a treasure chest buried in the sand. The challenge is kind of chaos, with Sean and Colleen starting off with a swim. Colleen gets her tribe off to a deficit, then Toggy decides to smash a bottle to get a map, and it seems like Pagong doesn't want to smash theirs, further setting them back. Jervis gets maybe a little lost in the woods, and Jenna and Gretchen can't get their treasure unburied, really just ending up being a demoralizing loss for the Pagong tribe on so many fronts, despite them all trying really hard and using a lot of energy. There's an extended sad montage, and they're still sad when they get back to camp. As far as we can see, there's not a lot of strategizing before Tribal, with Colleen and Jenna feeling nervous because they held the team back in the challenge, and Jervis wants to vote for Jenna because
she's more annoying than Colleen.
At Tribal, where they're all wearing face paint, there's no conch after one tribal council with the conch. R.I.P. Conch, gone but not forgotten. It's clear that this tribe all really like each other. Jeff asks them if anyone feels confident they'll be safe, and Jervis is the only one to raise his hand. Jeff calls Jervis out for sucking in the challenges they've lost, and then asks the group who feels vulnerable, and Jervis is again the only person to raise his hand, making them all laugh. In the voting, we see Jervis and Ramona vote for Colleen. Greg votes for Jenna and calls it a self-fulfilling prophecy, which I don't understand. And Jenna votes for Ramona, once again saying,
A little too late.
In the end, Ramona is voted out by a vote of 4 to 2 to 1, with Jenna, Colleen, Gretchen, and Joel voting her out. And we have to say goodbye to Ramona here, who on the rewatch I really enjoyed. She has a really funny personality. I feel like there probably were a lot more funny confessionals from her that were left on the cutting room floor. They end up choosing to focus on her being sick and lazy. In the end, in this last episode, I think she got a really great goodbye story, with her being motivated by Jervis and really working her ass off to try to not be voted out. After the show, she would go back to work in chemistry, and as I mentioned earlier, she joined joined up with other ex-survivors to form a petition to CBS to take more accountability in diversity, and she was one of the main voices that led to the diversity initiative we see now. In recent interviews, she hilariously says her biggest regret is not drinking enough water to stay hydrated, and she feels like she didn't really get to play the game and wants to play again. And you know what? I don't think it's unrealistic that if we had a second chance or a game changer season, she'd be on it. As a player from season 1 who literally has changed the game and how it's cast through her community work. Moving on to episode 5, titled Pulling Your Own Weight. It's a new dawn on Pagong after voting out Ramona, and Colleen says,
We slept late for the first time since we've been here today.
They're feeling low morale, and Greg has an ear infection and is feeling sick. I think it comes across interesting that after they voted Ramona off for being lazy and sick, everyone's suddenly lazy and sick. Gretchen is upset because the camp is still a mess and the flag isn't up, which is truly pitiful. Like, put that flag up, you slobs. No wonder why you have no morale. Over at Tagi, flag flying with pride, they've constructed a full patio using the parachute from the reward drop as a tent for shade. Kelly thinks Sean and Dirk are basically frauds because they go out fishing knowing full well they won't catch anything and are just lounging on the raft. Sean tries to defend himself.
Kelly thinks that failure to catch fish is failure to try.
When they clearly are just doing nothing.
Not even a nibble. It's our day off, brother.
Sue confronts the boys.
During the day, you should go out in the woods looking for tapioca and nuts. You guys wasted 3 days fishing during the day.
I don't think it was a waste.
Well, did you catch anything?
Dirk says the only reason he came out here is to have fun and grow in his faith. Rudy weighs in.
The only reason I'd bring a Bible is I'm religious too, if I needed toilet paper.
Jeff shows up and nails up an announcement for yet another first annual event, a weapons tournament, giving them a blowgun, slingshot, and spear. The tribes will be competing in tests of accuracy. Tagi learned that Sean and Rich are marksmen with blow dart and slingshot respectively, and Sue is
The wild woman with the spear.
over at Pagong.
The world's strongest man!
They go to their challenge, which comes across as especially game showy, and I wish they did more things like this in present day. They do their blow dart section, which is rushed and disorganized. The targets are different fruits. They kind of just randomly blow and hit some fruits, and the fruits go into the basket. There are some fruit on the wall in the back that seem impossible to hit, and there seems to be no more benefit to hitting them than the giant melon right in front of them. And it seems like the show or the editors weren't really impressed with how entertaining this was. It's kind of skipped past. In the slingshot round, they're just trying to smash some pots, and then they get to the final spear throwing round where we find out it's a winner takes all round where whoever gets closest to the center of the target wins all the fruit that they hit during the first few rounds. And a mystery food source. It's a face-off between Sue and Joel, which ends up being a real nail-biter actually, with them both being good with the spear and Joel getting a near bullseye, winning all the fruit. For Pagong and egg-laying chickens is the mystery prize. They bring their chickens back to camp, and they don't do chickens anymore on this show, huh? They want the chickens to lay eggs, but Gretchen says they're stressed out in a box, they're not going to lay any eggs. Jenna names the chickens breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and yeah, I see why they don't do this anymore. Winning the reward puts Pagong in better spirits, so they finally put up their flag. Tagi have a positive mental attitude, with Sue saying she doesn't want to kill a chicken and Rich deciding to make it up to the tribe by catching some fish. Rich catches them a giant eel that they all eat and hate. At Pagong, an interesting character moment as Greg feels uncomfortable sleeping in the shelter, so he just sleeps by himself in the jungle in a nest of leaves that he made. Then, wowza, Colleen is joining him in the jungle to sleep. Okay, now I see why I thought they were going to hook up in the jungle. These two have a walk of shame back to camp in the morning.
I think it's stepped up a notch, maybe. A little romance going on.
Colleen doesn't help their case, saying,
When we go off, it's all about sex. It's a really passionate affair right now.
Rich finds a snake and goes into biologist mode, saying he wants to throw the snake in the water just to watch it swim. He picks it up and yeets it into the ocean, then tells us that the snake is deadly and if bitten, you'll die in 6 hours. Why did you touch it, Rich? Why touch it? Sean celebrates pooping for the first time in 2 weeks.
Nice work, Sean. Go New York, go.
Sean and Dirk decide to tug at Sue's heartstrings, going to hunt for tapioca. While they're gone, the Alliance plot their demise, including a joint confessional from Sue and Rich, where it's especially clear that they really don't like the guys. They come back after a big search with some tapioca, and Sue is comically sunbathing and unimpressed with their haul. Freaking Sue. They find out their immunity challenge has something to do with rowing. Tagi selects Kelly to be their rower because she's a whitewater rafter at home. Pagong picks Jervis because he's not good at swimming. During this, Greg, for no reason, breaks out into an extended West Side Story one-man show.
Could be. Who knows? Soon as it shows.
Here they come cannonballing down the sky. A rose.
can't wait. Who knows?
For their challenge, they're simulating a shipwreck, and the rowers need to row out and save the rest of them from the ocean, so they take off, and Jervis is much faster than Kelly at rowing. I really remember, even as a kid, finding it funny how Jervis pwns her after she was bragging so much about being the water queen. So Pagong wins immunity, and Kelly is crying, saying,
I got beat by a guy who can't even swim.
This is so irrational for obvious reasons. Tagi head to tribal council where Kelly owns her shortcomings in the challenge. Sean says he's there to have fun. Dirk admits to being pretty ineffective around camp. They talk about alliances, with Rich really being the first to come across as playing the game with Jeff's questions about alliances.
I think a bigger alliance is what all 6 of us have created.
We get to the votes where we see Dirk vote for Sue and Sean vote for Rudy, saying Rudy's weak in challenges. Jeff reads the votes, and it's revealed that Dirk is voted out by a 4-1 vote, with the alliance of 3 plus Rudy voting him out. Random that Dirk and Sean didn't vote together, but let's talk about Dirk, who was one of the more forgettable additions to this cast. If at all, he's probably most remembered for being very religious and annoying the other survivors with his preaching, even leading to Rudy, who says even as a religious person, he would only bring a Bible out there to wipe his butt, which seemed a bit extreme. Dirk and Sean are still close, and he apparently told Stacy in Ponderosa that the producers told him to vote her out. He now lives in California, where he got married in 2004 and has 2 daughters. This episode was really boring, and I don't know why it was titled Pulling Your Own Weight. I feel like it should have been titled Wild Woman with a Spear, or If I Needed Toilet Paper. Let me know in the comments, which of those 2 do you prefer? Episode 6 is titled Utter Revenge. On Tagi, after voting another person out who they accuse of being lazy,
We're laying around doing nothing.
Richard confirms that they know for sure that a merge is coming in 2 days. Kelly tells us she doesn't think the Pagong tribe are taking this seriously. She says they're just playing Island 90210 and playing in their mud volcano. This was oddly specific, and another example of the castaways knowing weird information they shouldn't know about the other tribes, which makes me totally believe Stacygate and why people were accusing the show of not being real. And there's this.
Jarvis. He's a pervert.
Like, oh my god, Sue, what a completely casual character assassination. Over at Pagong, they decide to eat their chickens. Good for them. Don't share those chickens with the Tagi haters. I'm gonna do you a favor and not show you them offing these hens. At Tagi, we get introduced to a new story, but one that's weirdly very important in Rich being naked. Rich has a fully naked confessional, basically saying he's shocked that people say he's naked all the time. He's only naked
Less than 1% of the time. I'd like to be naked all the time.
Sue is entertained by Rich being naked all the time.
Is he naked?
This is Sue, who just called Jervis a pervert, but I'm moving on. On first impression of Rich being naked, it's kind of weird given that 20 years later, nudity on the show is frowned upon. Obviously now, I think they see being on the show as a level of employment by CBS.
I don't agree with his lifestyle, and he probably don't agree with mine.
At this point, Rich also kind of forces Rudy to be in their alliance officially, saying that Rich is in control of being who's voted out, and he wants to carry Rudy as a shield who will definitely be voted out before him. Over at Pagong, a musical moment.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Would you be mine? Would you be mine?
Morning, Greg. Morning, Gretchen.
Well, this neighborhood is about to get rocked because it's time for another character assassination of Jervis, where we hear Jervis say,
I made a totally dumb statement now that I regret. Girls are the stupidest thing on the planet next to cows.
He tries to explain what he meant and backtrack, but Gretchen gets a kick out of this.
Like when they write your name on that piece of paper, they can look straight into the lens and go, no.
Colleen says Jervis is sexist and lazy, and he owns being lazy.
I haven't done a thing since I've been here, it seems like.
They say his charm has been getting him through the game.
But he hasn't been so charming today. Maybe he's gonna get the vote.
They get a can with a clue on it that both tribes say smells like dog food, but Rich eats a big spoonful cold and instantly regrets it. Jenna and Gretchen give it the old college try.
I'm good. You?
Yeah, I'm done.
For their challenge at night, we get some World War II history as they're doing another survival simulation of them scavenging for supplies like war helmets and can openers in the war zone. I love history, so I really liked that they explored the history of the area. And this is one aspect of Old Survivor that's sadly gone to time now that they stay in the same place. This challenge ends up being a mess because Tagi bodies this and finds items quickly, but once it's all over, Jeff tells them they brought back one of Pagong's items and therefore they lose. So Pagong wins a bunch of food. That night at Pagong, Jervis and Joel agree that if they win the next immunity, they can pretty much steamroll the rest of the game and take out all of the Tagis, feeling like it's obvious that they need to stick together, but they doubt Gretchen.
I've never heard Gretchen say I want to keep this team together.
Joel has valid points, and he's right, because Gretchen says she's anti-alliances, but will only vote with everyone if they're voting for who she wants to vote for. And Colleen and Gretchen cite Joel strategizing about the merge as a reason they want to vote him out if they lose immunity.
I know that ladies' man has irritated every woman in those tribes.
Jenna accuses Joel of mansplaining.
He has to explain everything so thoroughly. We just couldn't understand it without Joel.
Gretchen says it's something that the women all got together and realized they felt the same way about, and there's this weird eye roll from Joel that I'm gonna need a body language expert to analyze.
I definitely am not a chauvinist.
The next immunity challenge is kind of insane. They have an official army obstacle course assembled by the Green Berets, so literal soldiers show up to hand them their marching orders. The challenge is an extremely physical obstacle course with a balance beam at the end where only 4 players from each tribe will play. Colleen, Jervis, and Rudy sit out. It's crazy that for such an important challenge, they conveniently let Rudy sit out for pretty much no reason. Pagong should have had to sit only one person out and Rudy should have played. It comes down to a close foot race where Tagi wins by literal seconds. If Rudy were playing, they would have definitely lost this challenge. And if Sonia were there, they would have dragged her face down through the whole course. So yeah, this was rigged, and now Pagong has to go to tribal. When they get back to camp, they find out that a monitor lizard has got into their chicken box and ate their last chicken. They find the gross mangled chicken carcass, and Gretchen decides they need to still eat it, which is really kind of gross, especially since they've been pretty well fed at Pagong. The ladies are deciding who to vote for between Jervis and Joel, both of whom have been marked as chauvinists, but they really should have thought about this more. I'll talk about that later. At tribal, Jeff instantly brings up Jervis's cow comment, really putting them on blast in a way that I like, because I do think that things that happen at camp that everyone's aware of should just be blown up at tribal by Jeff, which would add a little more excitement at tribal.
What was your take on that, Gretchen?
And I don't really believe that Jervis. Oh, were we not supposed to say who's that?
Come on. This sounds so much like Joel, though.
They say that Joel is linked in with Jervis in the situation because he laughed at the joke, and they head to vote. Gretchen votes for Joel, and sadly, she doesn't say moo. Jenna gives the people what they want.
Moo.
Jeff reads the votes, and Joel is voted out by a vote of 4-2, with he and Jervis having voted for Jenna. So we say goodbye to Joel here. As a viewer, I'm not mad about it, as he didn't really add anything to the show besides having light drama with BB earlier this season, and pretty much was used by the show as a macho eye candy. Then being exposed as having chauvinist tendencies this episode. I'm more interested in this vote than him as a character, as he and Jervis seemed to be the most interested in the game and did seem to have a good plan for the merge. So I can't help but feel like this tribe should have voted Jenna out at this point. They really only needed Greg to vote for Jenna, and then she would have had to face off in a physical challenge against Joel, which she'd likely lose. Jenna making it to the merge is a huge part of the issues that Pagong have coming up, which I'll talk about next episode. Joel would have solidly voted with Jervis at least, and that would have been at least some game foundation that the Pagongs needed. He also claims he had a relationship with Sean and could probably have pulled Sean into their alliance and been his new Dirk. I found a recent interview from Joel from March of 2024, and he looks almost exactly the same 25 years later. He got married in 2018 and has a teenage son, works in media production now, and has a small construction business. In Quarantine Questionnaire with EW, Joel is pretty blatantly open about production's manipulation on the season, and I do agree he was kind of screwed over by the obvious riggery I talked about earlier. So these next 2 episodes, when I recorded them, I was sick and the audio quality was so bad, I'm redoing the audio for them. We get to episode 7 titled The Merger. The episode starts with Jeff explaining the merger to the viewers, which must have been both exciting and a little confusing on a first watch. They get right into it with Sean and Jenna being picked as representatives of their tribes. They'll assess each other's camps and decide which camp they'll be living at. Interesting that yet again Jenna is chosen to represent the tribe. As they make their way, Sean and Kelly try to describe Rich.
But you know, we got the gay guy, gay compassionate guy.
Rich is a sweetheart, so easygoing. He's naked a lot.
Jenna arrives at Tagi, and Rich has conveniently just caught a lobster. Jenna is impressed with their camp. It's obvious that Tagi is the better camp because Jenna is having a great time getting fed, and the Pagongs give Sean a stick to snack on. Rich asks Jenna what rumors she's heard about them.
That you guys are plotting an alliance against us?
Who'd have told them this rumor? Definitely not production. Maybe it was BB. Rudy has finally come around to the idea of the Alliance.
I seem to like, if you want to win this money, you got to get a little dirty.
And the Alliance has a professional meeting to unpack the intel from Jenna, deciding that Sean isn't allowed to be in their alliance because
Sean is dumb.
Then an interesting thing to say when you're hugging.
You did come here to make friends.
I think Rudy is glad when Jenna leaves the camp.
He ain't shut up since she's been here.
Jenna and Sean meet for a summit. Jeff is always the romantic.
Wow, we're off to a good start. A little kiss. I like that.
They have to decide a new name for the tribe, which camp they'll be at, and which 3 items the losing tribe will be taking. They can decorate the flag, and they're sleeping on the sandbar. This seems like a really extravagant setup for them to make such minute decisions, giving them wine and lobster dinner. Jenna even confesses about how she felt here.
They're so setting this up for it to be romantic with Sean. There's not a spark there.
They give them a tent to sleep in and 4 bottles of wine, and they drink all of it, even saying they got pretty drunk. This is actually almost an irresponsible amount of alcohol to give them after not eating for weeks. The next morning, Gretchen expresses the same confusion as me. Why did the negotiation have to be all night? And she says they could have built a shelter in the time it took them to negotiate. At Tagi, Rich talks about a stingray the way Sean talks about Rich.
Yeah, he's a good fatty.
Jenna and Sean pull up to Pagong, probably so hungover, and tell them they're moving to Tagi Beach. They decided to name their new tribe Ratana. Greg feels kind of resentful of Jenna and Sean for bragging about all the things they were eating. Gretchen is excited to be at a more structured camp, but expresses that she learned a lot from Pagong about having fun and letting loose. The Pagongs raft to Tagi, which seems like a big hassle. When the tribes meet at Tagi, now Ratana, they get their new buffs. I love this green color. It's pretty cool they have branded buffs since season 1 because it's such an underrated part of the show. That they would have this very specific thing that would never change in 20 years. They could have started with t-shirts or bandanas. They really went hard with the buffs. The tribe socialize, with Greg being quickly annoyed by Sue's personality, and he feels like Rich is clever and sharp.
Rich is playing a big game, which is very fun, so he's awfully entertaining.
Rich says he feels like Jervis is letting Rich win at cards to play him, and Rich is entertained by Greg's failure to spearfish.
Came back in with a sea urchin.
That night, they show a random bit of a salacious story Jen is telling with absolutely no other context.
I've got this girl laid out across the back seat of like a Suzuki Psychic. It was like incredible.
And there's this.
Gretchen said she drank a 5th of whiskey in 2 minutes when she was 14. It sounds like we kind of have a similar past.
Rudy is not impressed.
They talk about a lot of sex stuff.
In the morning, the new people are frustrated with Rudy for being fussy in the cramped shelter. They meet at the challenge and are sitting on this challenge dock, which looks so lovely and relaxing. Jeff is casually wearing the immunity necklace, which he refers to as the talisman. Such a great word that we've lost to history. Vocabulary died with AOL. Jeff explains that the first ever individual immunity challenge is holding your breath. In the first round, they'll hold their breath, and the last 3 standing will move on to the next round. Not to brag, but I would win this. Jervis is the last one standing, and he knows it, but stays underwater being a showman. The final round is Jervis, Greg, and Sean. At least this round is more of a challenge where they have to follow a ladder underwater to release buoys, make it to the end of a course. It ends up being an epic race between Sean and Greg, with Compy's Greg winning this impressively and being the first ever individual immunity talisman holder in Survivor history. They head to Tribal Council, with Rich confessing to us that they have a solid 4-person alliance. There are still 10 people out there, so they're not yet in a place that they can run things in the game. This is a good point because they really have no control over Sean, and if the Pagongs could stick together, they have them beat, but Greg isn't down to play like that.
That to me is, whoa, cool flying fish. That to me is really boring.
Nor is Jenna.
I want to vote based on people's merits. I don't want to vote based on, let's get rid of each of them first.
Talk at Tribal is around new tribe dynamics. Gretchen says the logic has gone from who's weak to who's a strong competitor that I want to get rid of. It starts pouring rain, and they've clearly waterproofed Tribal as they stay completely dry. They get to the votes. Greg votes for Jenna, saying either be here or be gone. Another vote from Greg for Jenna, and another cryptic one-liner with the last being a self-fulfilling prophecy. My best guess would be maybe Jenna's been saying she wants to go home or keeps saying she misses her kids and it's annoying Greg. There are votes going all over the place, with Jenna voting for Jervis saying moo, Sean voting for Colleen declaring he's voting in alphabetical order now, unless someone pisses him off. Jeff reads the votes. This is a crazy result, with Gretchen being voted out by a vote of 4 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1. I'll talk about this vote in a second, but firstly we say goodbye to Gretchen, who I found to be a delight on the rewatch, though I never really paid too much attention to her in my previous watches. As a kid, I found her to be very bossy, which reminded me of my teachers. But now that I'm an adult, I find Gretchen so relatable, as she comes from this very rigid background, being a professional survival instructor, a no-nonsense job that probably made her an easy lock for this cast. She ends up on the Vibes tribe with Pagong really just not wanting to play her way, and despite knowing it all, she wasn't overbearing. She did lay down the law, but never received a single vote from her starting tribe. She had a journey of learning to be more flexible, learning to live a little, and is voted out here by the Tagis as as obviously a threat to win, as I do think if Gretchen makes it to the final 2, she beats almost everyone, as she does have everyone's respect. I've been enjoying reading old articles from the 2000s, which are still online. This episode's referred to Gretchen as everyone's winner pick who was ousted by corporate viper Richard, bulldog trucker Sue, and river rat Kelly, so that gives an idea of the public opinion of the time. She's been asked to come back 3 times, but has never made the final cut, but has expressed interest in really playing the game. After the show, she went on to host a morning radio show in her local area. I wouldn't mind seeing Gretchen again. I don't think it would happen. I'd like it though. With this vote, having the Tagi 4 being the 4 that voted together, and the Pagongs and Sean all voting for different people, I said the Pagongs were better off voting for Jenna last week because Greg obviously really doesn't like Jenna. He's already voted for her and will continue to vote for her, and Jenna ends up voting for Jervis. Had the Pagongs actually listened to Joel and Jervis and kept Joel, voted out Jenna, this vote would have been so much more organized for them. Moving on to episode 8, titled Thy Name is Duplicity. The next morning, the players are shook about the vote.
Last night it looks like there was a conspiracy.
The vibe at camp is misery, with the former Pagongs and Sean all being confused, bewildered, and upset. Rudy tells us it was his idea to vote out Gretchen because she was going to be the leader of the Pagongs. Rich affirms that the Tagis saw Gretchen as a threat. The Pagongs are completely snowed, with Jervis saying if it happens again, there's definitely an alliance. Jenna sees the alliance clearly, and her plan is to bond with the women and get them to vote with her, as I guess an okay plan if you really just don't want to work with your tribe. And Jenna clearly has issues with Jervis and Greg, so I feel like it wasn't the worst idea if she at least has a plan. Sue is letting Jenna believe that she's considering a girls' alliance, but she's not down.
Us girls are here for a while, trust me. As far as the women forming an alliance, no, it ain't gonna happen. I already got mine. I like mine.
Kelly points out that they're all hungry, nobody's providing anything besides Rich, and Rich now has more mouths to feed, so they're really struggling to ration food. Rich has a heroic montage where he catches a freaking shark, which is awesome, and their mood instantly changes when he provides.
I think Rich is in a great position. If we vote Rich or we don't eat.
Rich speculates about who voted for him, thinking it was Greg because Greg is threatened by him, and says that bringing this shark will show them that they need him. Leaders Greg and Rich go for a walk where they're definitely sussing each other out. Jenna says that Greg is being devious, like she's never seen him before, and Jenna says that Greg has Colleen wrapped around his finger. Then instant cut to Colleen, whose entire story on the show right now is about Greg. Colleen adamantly denies that they have a romantic connection. Greg then has a really uncharacteristically devious confessional about Colleen.
You bring this little kitty along, and the kitten sleeps with you every night, and then you're hungry, man. You look right in the kitten's eye and snap its neck.
Jenna assesses that Rich finds Greg attractive, and Greg purposefully flirts with Rich for strategy. They then show a night vision shot of Greg implying to Rich that he's been with men, and he'll tell him the story another time, to which Rich confesses that Greg is manipulative and basically trying to seduce him.
I would like to spend more time with him and get to know him, but I would also rather have the $1 million.
The next day, they get a tree mail that their reward will be something from home, which gets Jenna so excited to see her daughters. Go, Jenna. You're gonna see your daughters? Uh-huh, for sure. Definitely. Jeff shows up to camp with a big heavy box. Lots of Jeff showing up to camp this season. In the box is a fatback TV and VCR. They'll watch short clips from home, then the winner of an archery contest will get their full tape. Rich gets a message from his 8-year-old son. Kelly from her hippy-dippy boyfriend Tracy. A weird message from Greg's sister. Stu's husband is literally the male version of her. Colleen gets her parents and cat. Rudy's wife and granddaughter. Sean's family stage crashing his car. Jervis gets a message from his girlfriend and daughter. Jeff waits until the very end to break the news to Jenna that her family didn't send in a tape, which is especially cruel. Why not tell her in the beginning? Everyone is pretty speechless.
Are we gonna do the archery now? Anybody want cake?
The reward for the challenge is they get the video message, and they get to send a video home, which Jeff acts like is a consolation for Jenna, but who really cares about that? They get to the archery challenge. Jenna doesn't do well and says,
Oh, I wanted to see my daughters.
We know, Jenna, you wanted to see the daughters. You wanted to see the daughters. Greg ends up winning the challenge, and they get to watch Greg's sister's whole weird video.
Muka luka mau mau ping ping. That's right, ping ping. How's Phantom?
Instead of watching the video, Jenna is taking her emotions out on the archery, and then Greg gets to make an even weirder message to his sister.
Hi, Julie. We feel like we could feel you, and we felt you. And others just imagine what it's like to feel you.
It sounded like Greg was talking maybe incest.
Sexual illusions for my sister? God, what are people gonna think? And what's gonna happen?
happened?
At this point, the show has broken Jenna. The next day, Jenna is still disturbed, and Greg says Jenna wants to go home. Talk at camp is about Jervis not pulling his weight, which especially annoys Sue.
He's a slacker. He won't be around long.
But some people appreciate Jervis.
I'm just being me, and people like me because that's who I am.
They go to their immunity challenge where they're going to do a ropes course. Jeff over-explains the rules about the carabiners needing to be clipped. This challenge actually looks really hard, and Jervis pretty much just leads the whole time and wins. Back at camp, the Tagi 4 meet to choose who's going home, and Kelly is starting to feel sympathy for the Pagongs. Jervis tries to talk sense into Colleen and Sean, saying they should have voted for Rudy last tribal, and Colleen has a confessional saying that the Pagongs have the upper hand right now because they have 4 people. They can all vote together and bring in Sean. At tribal, Jeff asks the Tagis if they're in an alliance, and Sue and Kelly deny it, saying they just vote off who they don't like. Colleen says she pretty much just doesn't want to play the game, and Jeff gets kind of sassy with her, saying, "Why did you come here if you don't want the $1 million?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, you're right. I mean, I want the money. We all do." So they get to the vote, and we see Jervis vote for Jenna, saying she's missing her kids and this is her ticket home. Colleen votes for Jenna too. Sean votes for Greg, saying Jervis would have been his vote, but Jervis won immunity, so he got skipped, so Sean's alphabet strategy follows the Final Destination pattern. Greg votes for Jenna again, adding,
"First time for paranoia, second time for irritation, third time because my ear infection is clearing up."
And Rich votes for Greg.
No more competition.
In the end, Greg is voted out by a vote of 6-3, with all of the Tagis and Jenna voting out Greg, and Jervis, Colleen, and Greg voting for Jenna. Greg has one final act of weirdness on the way out.
I believed him for a minute.
You believed him, Rudy?
So we say goodbye to Greg here, who was a big presence on the season despite not actually doing much to really further the gameplay of the show. He was very silly, talking on his coconut phone, sleeping in the woods with Colleen. A few musical moments. It seems his role on the season was the wannabe comedian, comedic relief, though he did have a lot of actual survival experience, having built a really impressive and effective rat trap. His resistance to play the game was kind of a buzzkill. It's a bit of a buzzkill to see such a young, seemingly free spirit be so offended and indignant over the fact that people were playing a game and be so resistant to the fact that he's on a game show. In a future interview, he'll say that he was very anti-establishment at the time. He was a recent anthropology student at Brown and would proceed to work in nonprofit and climate science. He's listed online to be the president of a huge green energy company across the US, which would probably keep him from returning to the show despite fans really wanting this. I'd like to see it, but I don't think it'll happen. Moving on to episode 9, titled Old and New Bonds. It's a new day at Ratana, and Rich and Sue take great pride in lying in Jeff's face at Tribal about their alliance. They think it's hilarious, but Colleen is shocked that they would lie in front of America and proclaims that whoever wins the money is not going to be deserving. Kelly's cold feet about the alliance grow colder, feeling like the Pagongs are lambs to slaughter, and she's not cool with it, so she wants to do things on her own moving forward. As Rich spearfishes, the other men discuss him.
He sure don't do a damn thing around here except fish.
I sort of liked him before I knew he was queer.
And again, what is this conversation? But the guys agree that Rich is the epicenter of the group and he's keeping them fed and they need him. Sean says that Rich is insecure and he's using his provider role to fill the gaps in his insecurities.
I'm staying around here because I'm bright. It has nothing to do with catching fish. They're not voting me off because I'm not letting them.
Rich catches a stingray and Colleen doesn't want to watch the stingray be killed. The show makes Colleen look negative for this, but I feel like not wanting to watch something get killed is a fair point of view. Due to a fire-related misunderstanding by Rudy, the stingray gets cooked all crunchy, which highly irritates Rich. Rich decides that he's now on strike, and this will show the others to be more appreciative. He's fully having a BF about his overcooked ray. Rich is being really annoying about this, and Colleen roasts him in confessional harder than Rudy roasted the ray.
Go home, go get your liposuction, and go catch more fish. Thinks he's so above everybody. Full of baloney.
The girls acknowledge that they're reliant on Rich to provide their food, but end up checking their traps and finding some giant fish.
We caught a fish today, finally, yes.
So they bring the fish back to a visibly threatened Rich, who now needs to regroup because he really can't starve them as a strategy. Jeff shows up and takes them to see the reward before the challenge, a barbecue with all the fixins and letters from loved ones back home. Jenna actually got one this time. Jeff's goal of showing them the reward before the challenge is because the challenge is actually really difficult looking and he needs them to try hard. They have a suspended spider's web ropes course with 16 medallions they all need to collect. Of course, this ends up being a really chaotic and not really fun to watch challenge. Colleen ends up winning the challenge and has a bit of a comical misunderstanding with Jeff.
Got a great letter from home.
How would you feel about inviting?
Everybody!
Not quite.
But Jeff tells Colleen to pick one person to join her, and obviously she picks Jenna because anyone else would be cruel. They head to the reward, and the show really makes a meal out of comparing Jenna and Colleen having an absolute banger of a time at the barbecue to their tribe mates miserably preparing and nibbling on basic rations. Colleen and Jenna have a rational conversation where Colleen says the old Pagongs and Sean could team up and vote together against the Tagi Alliance. They get their letters, and Jenna gets drawings from her kids, which is a nice moment that she definitely deserved. The next morning, a rare thrill, it's a survivor birthday. It's Rich's birthday, and he celebrates by getting into his birthday suit. The fun quickly turns sour when Rich comes naked into camp and sits his bare hiney right down next to Jenna.
I wanted to get away. It felt awkward sitting next to a naked gay man.
Who was with you? A queer that ran around bare ass half of the time.
Firstly, this would never fly today. As I've said, I feel the production sees this as more of a professional environment now where the comfort and safety of cast members and crew alike are taken more into account. But I can't help but notice anytime someone calls Rich a pervert, basically it's always attached to some reference to his sexuality. For example, Jenna saying, I don't want to be next to a naked gay man instead of just a naked man. They talk about Colleen covering her eyes at Rich being naked, and Rich shares his point of view that I don't think is a very good logical point.
But if I lived my life based on what made other people uncomfortable, I wouldn't be living my life.
Later, Sean tells us that Jenna is next in his alphabetical voting order, but Sean also tells Jervis that if he's the swing vote, he won't vote for Jenna. I feel like I misremember that Sean was so stuck to this alphabet strategy, but it's really all just bullshit and a game that he's playing. They head to their immunity challenge that sees them navigating a game board, stepping on squares and flipping them over. When they run out of squares, they're out of the game, and I like this challenge and wish they did it more often, as this is strictly strategy and anyone can win. It can come off as a snooze, but I've never been particularly bored watching something like this. I'm always on the edge of my seat of who will be eliminated. The Tagis pretty successfully edge out the Pagongs, and Rudy eventually wins immunity. As winner, poor Rudy has to flip the rest of the tiles of the game board, which feels like a punishment. Back at camp, Colleen and Jenna are committed to not helping the Tagis do chores and are laying in their hammock. Colleen says her options are to try to make it by and wait for herself to get cut loose, or to strategize. Jervis agrees that they've been stupid, but now it's time for them not to be stupid anymore. So you would think that this would segue into the Pagongs strategizing, coming up with a plan, but Jenna and Colleen are experimenting with buff fashions, and Kelly's looking on like, I want to play. So Kelly joins in using her buff as a top, which pisses off Rich and Sue. Sue fully confronts Kelly, getting really in her face. We only get a short clip of it, but it really looks like Sue is ripping Kelly a new one.
Yeah, they're dressing like superheroes.
And the way they walk around hand in hand, I even thought about lesbianism.
At this point, I think that Jenna and Colleen are just trolling the Tagis out of boredom from knowing their time is limited, and Kelly finds it entertaining. The Pagongs are planning on voting for Rich, but there's truly no way that Rich will go home, even if Kelly flips.
And the fact that we're voting him out on his birthday, it's not lost on me. We're giving him a birthday present.
At Tribal, Jeff explains the concept of the jury to us and them, and Greg awkwardly saunters in barefoot from the shadows upstage without a real introduction. Jeff wishes happy birthday to Rich and addresses that Rich spent the day in his birthday suit, making his other tribe mates uncomfortable. Eek. Jeff asks about Sean's alphabet strategy, with Sean openly admitting that the Tagis are eligible to be voted for when they come up. This triggers Sue.
He doesn't have enough balls to make a decision.
They get to the votes, and the Pagongs finally band together to vote for Rich, though there was obviously no way this was going to work, and it really seems like they just wanted to stick it to him on his birthday. In a way, this probably was good for jury management for Rich, allowing them to let out some steam and bitterness towards him at this point. In the end, Jenna is voted out by a vote of 4 to 3 to 1, with Sue, Rich, Rudy, and Sean having voted for Jenna. The Pagongs voted for Rich, and Kelly was the sole vote for Sean. So we have to say goodbye to Jenna here, who is the first person we'll talk about who's returned to the show as a returnee. Because of this, I'm going to focus only on this season in hopes that one day I'll get to talk about her on All Stars. She actually did a lot this season, starting on her original tribe, where we see her really dive into the entire process, being really hardworking as referenced by BB, eating the dog food with Gretchen, which looked really gross, and being excited to eat rats. She's also shown telling really personal stories, showing that she really went into the show putting it all on the line. It seemed like she was the most invested in the process of her tribe, as she was picked twice to represent the tribe, once in a challenge and at the merge as an ambassador. She was probably the only one who wanted to go both times, and she was definitely not picked because she was liked, because members from both tribes call her annoying throughout the season. I found her performative energy to be appreciated on the rewatch, as she seems fun and funny and one of the biggest personalities on this cast. At the merge, while she was on Pagon Pagong who couldn't get it together, she seemed to be the most eager to actually save her life in the game, being aware of the strategic dysfunction of the Pagongs and having the best plan of all of them to try to weasel her way in with the Tagi women, which did seem to work with Kelly, but she just couldn't get Sue on her side. So strategically, she was present, but pretty ineffective. Her most memorable moment was the loved ones video debacle, which could have been handled better by production, but did make for a really great TV moment. So I guess it justifies almost purposefully trying to break her spirit. Though, from what I've seen, Jenna's a tough cookie who was going through a hard time missing her kids, but would never have quit the game. I can totally see why she was brought back for All-Stars, because she had potential in the game and showed producers that she's down for anything, including being set up for TV drama. She's living in California, has gotten remarried, has 2 more kids since this season, and has expressed interest in returning to the show again for a 3rd time. I'd actually like to see it, though it's extremely unlikely. Episode 10 is titled Crack in the Alliance. We open to sad music. Colleen and Sean are both looking miserable following Jenna's departure. Rudy tells us that the vote was going to be for Jervis, but they changed it to Jenna last minute, and that it was the women's idea, which obviously means Sue pushed hard for Jenna to go, with the reasoning being that Jenna talks a lot. They all go rafting, and even Jervis and Colleen are laughing at Sue talking crap about Jenna, which just ain't right. Colleen lays out that she's sure that there's an alliance, but Jervis and even Sean both confess that they're not sure if the alliance really exists. Rich explains to us that they took advantage of Sean's alphabet strategy because they knew he was going to vote for Jenna, so they voted for Jenna too. Sean claims to us that if he knew they were going to vote for Jenna, he wouldn't have voted for her, and he feels used by them because he totally was. I'm not really buying what Sean is saying here. He seems pretty bought into the alphabet thing. Rich thinks it's hilarious that people are trying to strategize against his alliance at this point because it's way too late and he's got the game stitched up. Jervis feels proud that the votes against Rich seem to have affected him. Rich announces that now he's going to fish less and continue regulating everyone's meals. He says he's gonna cool it with the fishing until the Pagongs are gone. Sue completely agrees. Rich still goes out to fish, which he declares as his last fishing trip until the final 5, and relates hunting for fish to hunting the other players in the game.
I'm picking off the tribe members one by one. I've been stalking them since before we got on the island.
Sue tells us,
My strategy all along has been to just play the role as a dumb redneck.
She says that if everyone thinks she's dumb, they'll give her information, and says that Rich has fallen into her trap. She likes that Rich is burning his relationships with the other players. In this scene, Sue makes final 2 deals with both Rich and Kelly, painting that Sue is playing hard, but she has negative opinions of Rich and sees Kelly really highly.
I trust Kelly 100%. We're like sisters.
On Kelly, Sue breaks down that it's been 20 years since she lost her best friend and promises us that she's never going to turn on Kelly. But Kelly tells us she can't trust anyone. In their tree mail, they get a cigar and a letter for Jervis telling him that his son was born. Jervis explains that he has 2 kids from a previous relationship and now has 2 kids with his current girlfriend. The other survivors are extremely judgmental of Jervis and his life, with Rudy even doing a diatribe about how when he was growing up, if a woman got pregnant, they would take the girl out of town and make her have an abortion.
I'll agree with an abortion, but not having kids out of wedlock.
They head to their challenge where they have a tournament-style balance beam. They'll be eliminated in stages, and the one person who wins it all will get a phone call from home and a slice of pizza delivered by helicopter. Colleen, Kelly, and Rudy are eliminated in the first round, and Sue and Sean in the second, coming down to Rich and Jervis in the final round, where Jervis wins fair and square. Nobody was letting Jervis win this, even though he just had a baby. So Jervis gets his 1 slice of pizza, and it's presented as this amazing thing. They even make this little set. The helicopter comes to deliver the sorriest little box of pizza. Kind soul Jervis gives everyone a bite of his pizza, which he both shouldn't be allowed to do and shouldn't have done, because back at camp, Rich currently is planning to starve Jervis. Also, this pizza looks dry as hell. Jervis leaves to take his phone call, and Rich advocates for Jervis and defends his life, saying he seems to be trying to make a good life for his kids. Rudy still goes on another diatribe about how having kids out of wedlock is ruining kids' lives.
They need a family. They need somebody beating them in the head.
We see Jervis's call with Carmela and his daughter and newborn son, which is a sweet moment. Meanwhile, back at camp, everyone is still talking about Jervis's life. Colleen airs out that Jervis is having issues with Carmela, and Kelly airs out all of the tea about Jervis's first relationship. This is all none of their business. Rich and Sue reflect and are happy with their starting group, but agree that Kelly has flaky tendencies. Kelly is struggling with not wanting to be a part of the alliance anymore, thinking it's conniving and dirty. This episode really transitions the season from the story of Tagi versus Pagong to this narrative of Kelly's struggle with the Tagi alliance that will dominate the back half of the season. Rich even asks Kelly about her change in demeanor, and she's fully unable to even be fake to him about how she's feeling. Colleen tells us that Kelly is torn, but Colleen doesn't even see Kelly as a viable number to save herself, so Colleen also sees Kelly as flaky. They get another tree mail which sees Rich spitting bars.
Seeking immunity is part of the game. Now you'll rely on a flickering flame. Safety tomorrow is just within reach. Wait until sunset and head to the beach.
There's an extended slow motion walk to the immunity challenge, really feeling like they needed to extend the episode because there's literally nothing happening at camp. Their challenge is to race to a pile of driftwood in a fire pit, swim out to get fire, light it, and burn through their rope to raise their flag in what is, I guess, the origin of what we now know today as the fire making challenge. They have an allotted time to pile their driftwood, then Jeff calls time and they race out to get the fire. Everyone is making fire except Jervis, who has to go a second time to get fire, and eventually Rich wins this immunity challenge. Back at camp, Jervis knows his goose is cooked. He starts making a superhero costume for himself, calling himself Bullseye. Colleen calls herself Sitting Duck. Ahead of Tribal, it's really pouring, so they can't strategize, but Rich and Sue are really worried that Kelly is going to turn on them, and they're ready to punish her if she does. At Tribal, Jeff shades Sean for his alphabet strategy, and Sean proclaims that he's going to switch things up moving forward. Colleen again refers to herself as Sitting Duck, which is pretty on point, and when asked about it, Sue finally owns up to the alliance, comparing it to donating to a presidential candidate or joining a church to go gain community, which was a really eloquent speech, leading me to think that Sue would have slayed a final Tribal. They get to voting, and Jervis votes for Sean, saying Sean has no common sense, no brains in his head really, and Colleen calls Sean a putz when she votes for him, which is hilarious. In the end, Jervis is voted out by a vote of 5-2, with the aforementioned 2 being for Sean. So we say goodbye to Jervis here, another player who we'll see again on Survivor as a returnee in Blood vs. Water. But let's talk about Jervis's game. He comes into the Pagong tribe, where he says in interviews that he's friends with Ramona, who we see as his friend that he's trying to protect. Jervis and Joel were also trying to start an alliance, but they couldn't get everyone organized ahead of the merge, and the Pagongs fall one by one. And while I do think Jervis was using his brain the whole time, he was never going to get the help he needed to accomplish anything. The women on the Pagong tribe took issue with him making a bad sexist joke, which definitely didn't help him and Joel get them on their side, and I don't know if he ever really recovered from that reputation, but at some point they stopped talking about it. One thing that irked me is the way his personal content was framed, with the show showing the Tagis talking about his personal life and not letting him tell his own story, as that would have been a great TV moment that made Jervis look really great. Instead, it left a lot of room for the viewer to speculate about his personal life, but Jervis was received really well by the public, being a huge fan favorite. He made it onto the DVD cover over Sean, which I guess isn't a huge feat. He'd go on to own a cigar business. I wonder if that had anything to do with him smoking a cigar on the island, and garnered multiple TV and movie appearances, as well as a future Survivor appearance that maybe I'll talk about at some point. And now he posts memes on Instagram. Episode 11 is titled Long Hard Days. Sunrise on day 31, past the point where modern seasons even go. Everyone is glum and miserable. Rich is so used to the rain that he didn't even know it was raining on him as he was sleeping. Even Sean, who says he's not sentimental, is missing his family. Colleen is eaten alive by bugs, with open sores that bugs live in, which is so gross. We complain a lot about missing 39 days, but do we really want this? Does the time frame they spend on the island really impact the show? Colleen feels lonely and misses her Pagongs as the last Pagong standing, and Colleen gives a pretty good analysis of the Tagi dynamic.
Rich and Sue are promising one thing to Sean, promising another thing to Kelly. Sue and Kelly are promising one thing to Rich, another thing to Sean. Rudy just sits back and watches it all happen.
The Tagis are especially concerned with Kelly, with Sue again complaining that Kelly's been pandering to the Pagongs by being nice to them on the way out to secure their jury votes. Kelly pretty much admits in confessional that that is her strategy, and she's proud of it. Rich makes a formal final 2 agreement with Rudy here, and Colleen tells us she feels like the game is dirty and she wants nothing to do with it. They head to their reward challenge, where Jeff flexes his Visa credit card, which he's used to purchase a night on a yacht. Jeff has excellent credit, even so early in his career. They'll answer trivia questions, moving forward across colored squares. If they're left alone on a color, they're eliminated. The first person on the mat in front of Jeff gets to spend the night on the yacht. This challenge is so boring, and the editors know it's boring because they fast forward through multiple questions, because who cares? Kelly is eliminated, then Sue. It comes down to a tiebreaker between Sean and Rich, that Sean wins. Jeff cryptically tells Sean that one other person may be able to join him for breakfast. After the challenge, back at camp, Sean promises Kelly that she can be his +1 on the yacht reward. Kelly says that she's talked a lot of smack on Sean, but she's willing to walk it all back because he made that offer. It starts storming and it's misery. The cameras are wet, it's bad TV, but Sue says she prefers this to driving her truck. Damn. The next day, it's a gorgeous day. On days like this, do the survivors feel like they're on vacation? Be for real. No work for a month, beach, rainbow. Jeff shows up to pick up Sean and reminds Sean that he gets to bring someone for breakfast. Sean waffles, but ends up picking Rich to join him. Going back on his promise to Kelly, Sue calls Sean dumb behind his back. But that breakfast is the next day. For now, on the yacht, Sean gets champagne and a cheese board, basically has a whole date with Jeff, but we don't get to hear any of the conversation. I can't help but wonder why Rich couldn't just join Sean for this reward instead of this really awkward sit down with Jeff. And what were these two talking about? Sean is filmed showering, gets a massage, and the massage therapist pulls his towel off and spanks his bare butt. In a sweet moment, Jeff introduces Sean to the captain, who is really Sean's own father in disguise. Sean and his father have a lovely evening sipping that vino. Back at camp, Kelly is ranting and raving, calling Sean an asshole, where I'm sure everyone can hear her. In the morning, Jeff pulls up and tells Rich to get his skinny ass on the boat, and when they leave, Kelly is still talking smack about Sean. So Rich joins Sean and his father for a continental breakfast on the yacht. Later, Sean, Rich, and Sean's dad come back to camp. This all seems like a gigantic reward for Sean. Just for doing some trivia, Sue pretty much calls Sean's dad a waste of space because he has no good information from the outside world. She's asking him about the stock market and for updates on the Russian war in Chechnya, about the college playoffs. Before he leaves, Sean's dad passes out care packages from home with gifts, snacks, and letters, which was sweet. They head to their immunity challenge where they'll be standing on planks that are tied together. Over time, planks will be removed, making it harder to balance. The last person standing will win individual immunity. They get started. First of all, this challenge looks like crap, and the players are so annoying when they start singing bottles of beer on the wall, a school bus jingle that I'm grateful has been lost to history. Rudy is out first, followed by Rich. Rudy and Rich strategize from the sidelines that they plan to blindside Kelly at Tribal. After Sue and Sean fall, Sue joins the strategizing, and they decide that if Kelly wins immunity, they should vote out Sean instead of Colleen. Colleen and Kelly last until sundown, but Colleen falls, giving Kelly a much needed immunity, and Jeff awkwardly gives her insoles from Dr. Scholl's. There's no strategizing after they head their mostly unpadded feet straight to Tribal, with confessionals from the Taggies about how they resent Kelly, and Kelly saying she doesn't care what they think anymore, and that feels great. Given the conversations they were having on the sidelines, I think if they went back to camp and had time to strategize, this vote may have gone differently. At Tribal, Jeff quickly asks Sean about his reward decision. He says he picks Rich because Rich provides food for the tribe. Kelly interjects to heckle Sean. Sean is trying to laugh it off, but Kelly obviously feels very serious about it and is smiling but isn't really joking. They get to the votes where Colleen is voted out by a vote of 4-2, with Kelly and Colleen having voted for Sean. You can really feel everyone in America going, ugh, as this torch is snuffed, because how could you have not been rooting for this underdog queen to succeed, especially in the situation she was in this episode? Colleen started on the Pagong tribe, and pre-merge, her story was really focused on her friendship/relationship with Greg. Even as a kid, when they went out into the jungle, I had assumed they were hooking up, and even now, when they go into the woods, I assume that they're hooking up. At the merge, the Taggies vote out Greg, and Colleen becomes this comedic camp dweller who really is just a sitting duck, saying and doing silly things here and there until her time eventually comes. Jervis and Jenna are voted out because they aren't liked by the others, but at this vote, it really seems like they would have voted out Kelly had she not won immunity, or maybe even Sean if they had time to organize, given that in his voting confessional, Rich said that it wasn't supposed to be Colleen tonight. I really tried to analyze Colleen's game here. Obviously, the fatal flaw was that she just didn't want to play the game and felt it was slimy, but let's say Colleen wakes up this round and decides she wants $1 million. Is there a path for her to do so? She was aware of the cracks in the Taggi alliance, but I don't think she could have flipped enough votes, even if she tried to campaign, as she would have at some point needed Sean, Kelly, and Rudy to all flip on Rich. But what I think is interesting is, what if Colleen just tries a little bit harder in this immunity challenge and beats Kelly? Rich says in his vote that Colleen was supposed to stay, which means they really did want Kelly to go at this point. If Colleen would have truly realized the importance of this immunity challenge, she would have tried harder. Kelly leaving in this round opens the door for Colleen to potentially win her way to the final two, and win the $1 million, as she would have guaranteed jury votes from the Pagongs and Kelly, but she just kind of accepts the role as the sitting duck and accepts her ouster here. I found her to be really enjoyable here, especially compared to the entertaining but often negative Taggies. Following the show, Colleen would go on to be loved by America and seen as a sweetheart, even being cast in The Animal alongside Rob Schneider. She leaned into some fame, but ultimately decided to live an extremely private life, becoming a bit of a survivor Bigfoot with a few Colleen sightings over the years, but she purposefully keeps out of the limelight and focuses on her professional career. Fans want her to return, and I'll be honest, I don't think I need to see it if she's not going to be invested in the game, so I think it's just about time that we leave this lady alone. Moving on to episode 12, 12, titled Death of the Alliance. It's day 34 on Ratana. We're down to the final 5 who acknowledge that their alliance made it to the end. They instantly start getting nasty with each other, with Sean saying they all talk crap about each other. Kelly calls Rich tricky, but Rich refers to himself as Machiavellian. Rich tells Kelly he wants to take her to final 2, with a quick cut to Rich telling Rudy that Kelly is his target. Sean calls them the most conniving group of people he's ever met. Meanwhile, this poor camera person nearly trips over themselves trying to catch this argument that breaks out between Kelly and Sue. Sue is getting in Kelly's face, saying Colleen told Sue that Kelly's out to get Sue. Sue storms out to fish and backs into the ocean with her fins on. Sue says Kelly made everyone look like idiots in a confessional where she's fully spread eagle in a puddle, shaving her inner thigh. This is the person who is concerned about looking like an idiot on TV. Kelly goes on the defensive, spreading that she was always completely loyal to the Tagis, but she just voted for Sean, which makes her argument a bit weak. Rich decides to just lay back and let them fight, and be the peacemaker to progress himself in the game. Sue has a pretty productive, angry fishing session. She catches a ray, but she gets stung and makes a whole show of it, complete with sympathetically holding her own wrist. The next day, Sue has fixed herself a cast. The players are dead as hell on the beach. This is so boring. Truly, why do we want the game to get to day 34? In my rewatch, I want to find something really exciting that happens past day 29 that is specifically because they're out there for a longer period of time. They head to the mud volcano for their reward challenge, where they'll have 5 minutes to get as much mud as they can onto their bucket using only their bodies to transport the mud. The winner of the challenge will get boated to a bar to drink beers with Jeff to watch the first 5 minutes of the premiere of this season, which is a crazy reward. I always question the logistics of how this was even possible. They get started. This challenge looks like a lot of fun. I love the challenge of transporting mud on your body. It feels like something every reality show did in the early 2000s, but you don't see really anymore, which is a real pity if you ask me. They're slipping and sliding, and poor Rudy takes a hard fall that they really milk for laughs. Kelly wins this challenge and gives Jeff a big filthy hug. Back at camp, the challenge seems to have bonded everyone back together, especially Kelly and Sue, who are grooming each other to Rich's fascination. Later, Kelly heads to the reward at the Survivor bar, which seems like a real bar. Why did Kelly have to be double blindfolded to get to this location? Like, what could she possibly see on the way to the reward that is watching the first 5 minutes of the show that she's on that could spoil the production? So Kelly and Jeff get to drinking. Firstly, after 34 days on Survivor, the way I would be instantly drunk off of 1 beer and cry to Jeff at this Survivor bar and spend the remaining 5 days with anxiety. Jeff acts like he's never been to a bar before.
Let me get that salt.
This meal looks horrible. The plate of pasta looks disgusting. Jeff smiles and nods as Kelly tells him she wants to make peace with Sue, and they put the episode on their little fatback TV for the whole bar to watch. It's cool for Kelly, but even cooler for Jeff, as he's also potentially watching the first 5 minutes of the show for the first time with a giant smile on his face. The next day, on day 36, Kelly and Sue clear the air and agree to be civil, but Sue tells Kelly that their working relationship in the game is over. She's moving forward with Rich and without Kelly. Sean proclaims he's in it to win it. He knows he needs to win immunity and says he sees cracks between Sue and Kelly that he wants to try to exploit. Suddenly, Sean wants to be conniving, which feels hypocritical since he was just complaining about everyone else doing what he says he's going to do. They get a clue on a camcorder with a message from a very sweaty Jeff talking about the Survivor Witch Project in a clear reference to the Blair Witch Project. For their challenge, they each have a camcorder. They have to race to the jungle, find 5 masks, and answer 5 trivia questions. So they sit around listening to Jeff tell these boring stories. Their questions will be about these stories. So they get started. It's wild seeing them running around with these cameras. This is a weirdly technological challenge. A choice. Ultimately, even 20 years later, the show would never do anything like this today. It's also a headache to watch. Thank God for Rudy adding some entertainment to this, not knowing the answers to any of the questions.
Well, a spirit still in the air to conch show. I don't know. What is the one event that has overshadowed the departure to most of the survivors from tribal council? I don't know. You come lost in the jungle, what should you do to find your way home? I don't know.
He must not have listened to a word Jeff was saying. Kelly finishes first, winning a much needed immunity. Back at camp, it's raining and Sean has a very confident confessional.
I'm winning this thing. You know, it's going to be an uphill battle for me, but I'm winning this thing, the whole show.
Rudy has other plans. He wants to go to Final 2 with Rich, who seems to be the only person who's even asked for such a thing from Rudy. The players aren't shown strategizing at camp, though in confessionals, Rich is nervous. Sean says he's voting for Sue, and Kelly says she's voting for Rich or Sue. At Tribal, Kelly says she desperately needed immunity because she was going to be voted out, and Jeff calls her the ultimate swing vote because she's safe. They start a conversation about Rudy's support from his buddies back home.
Do you think your buddies are going, go Rudy, go?
They're behind me. They better be.
Even after you said you liked the homo?
When we're done with this, I'm gonna shake his hand and hope I never see again.
Ouch, those are harsh words. Sue makes a great little speech about money tearing people apart in the real world, which again makes me feel like Sue would have spoken really well in the final two. In the end, Sean is voted out by a vote of 4-1, with his vote having been for Sue. So we lose Sean here, who was fortunate to have started on the Tagi tribe, where he survived the pre-merge by the skin of his teeth, pissing off his tribe with his super pole fishing pole antics. Had they gone to one more tribal before the merge, he would have been toast. I say he was fortunate as the pagonging led to him being carried to this point, but he's really the least valuable player in the Tagi alliance. Before I analyze his game, I'll preface by saying he doesn't seem to have cared that much about the game, and it showed, as he didn't even vote with Dirk on the Dirk vote off, randomly voting for Rudy there. And at the extremely important Gretchen vote, where they merged 5-5, Sean is the only person to vote against the Tagis, casting a vote for Colleen. Had the Pagongs had their act together and all voted together, the Tagis get decimated all because of Sean. He's remembered for his alphabet strategy, but he decides to implement that strategy at the merge, mostly because he wants to look impartial, as it was convenient that all the Pagongs' names all fell at the beginning of the alphabet, so if he ends up in the final two with Rich or Sue, he could get all the Pagongs' votes, which could have worked out for him. The show makes him seem like a silly character, but he's not a stupid guy. He's a doctor and he did have a plan. He sticks with his alphabet strategy for a few rounds, but after the Gretchen vote, the Tagi alliance just vote with Sean, which leads to his plan backfiring on him, with him actually ending up deciding the boot order of the Pagongs. In a confessional, he does express that had he known that was going to happen, he would have abandoned the alphabet strategy and played differently. He eventually does abandon the strategy to vote for Colleen and then Sue, so while he did become known for this strategy, he didn't start with it or stick with it the whole time, and does seem to want to win the game despite not really playing a very good game. Following the show, like the rest of the cast, he would relish in some short-lived fame, but would just go on to go back to his life being a doctor. He's still a doctor now. He's a neurologist in Florida and is married with 3 kids. I watched some interviews where he seems really happy with his Survivor experience, but he doesn't keep up with the show anymore and says he doesn't want to play again. Moving on to the season finale, episode 13, titled The Final Four. It's day 37, and with 2 days left, the players can see the end. As Sue gives Rudy a makeover with her thigh razor, they list their physical afflictions and the impact their time out there has had on their bodies, with Rich feeling like he's lost 30 pounds and has tons of loose skin. At this point, Sue refers to Kelly as her enemy, a far journey from a few episodes ago where she called Kelly her sister. They're down to their final 4 alliance. Rich finds it laughable that the rest of the cast barely tried to win the game and thinks they didn't even read the outwit, outplay, outlast slogan on the flag. Rich is also disappointed to hear that Sue and Kelly had a side alliance, because it means that the final 4 alliance didn't make it to the end loyally, but it seems hypocritical since he himself had side deals with all of the Tagis. They get tree mail with Polaroids of their fallen players and speculate about the upcoming challenge.
Maybe this challenge will be the last questions about how old they were, what they do for a living, which I don't know, and I don't care.
The group still wants Kelly out, and she knows it, obviously. Rudy seemingly has no relationship with anyone on this tribe other than Rich. He's never talking to Sue, especially he's never talking to Kelly. They head to Tribal Council, where they'll be playing their immunity challenge in front of the jury, playing a quiz game called Fallen Comrades, answering questions about the players who have been voted out along the way. I found this a bit interesting, with Rich not knowing that Stacy had received a vote at the first tribal, despite having cast that vote himself. This challenge was a must-win again for Kelly, and is pretty obviously geared towards Kelly, but Sue gives Kelly a run for her money. They ask for Jenna's kids' names, and Kelly is the only person who knows, which I think is kind of embarrassing for the others, as Jenna talked about them all the time. Kelly even flexes that she knows their middle names. Rich royally chokes in this challenge, barely knowing anything that happened at Tagi, but really knowing anything about the Pagongs. It comes down to a tie between Kelly and Sue. They're asked what Sonia's last name is. Kelly knows it's Christopher. Sue doesn't, potentially because Kelly watched the first 5 minutes of the show, and they get straight into voting with no discussion. They vote, and on the first vote, it's a tie, with 2 votes for Sue, 2 for Rich, in the first tie in the show's history, with Rich and Rudy having voted for Sue, and Kelly and Sue for Rich. Jeff sends Kelly and Rudy to a revote. There was no changing Rudy's mind here, and Kelly ends up switching her vote to Sue, meaning Sue is voted out by a vote of 2-0. I have a lot to say about this vote. I think Kelly made the right move tying the vote and voting for Rich, especially because she had immunity. Why not fuck around and find out? Kelly needs Sue's jury vote, and if she just gives Sue the chance and goes to bat for Sue here, it potentially shows Sue that Kelly isn't a rat after all, but switching just seems so unnecessary, and if she was going to do that, she should have just voted for Sue in the first place. So we lose Sue here, who started the season on Tagi and quickly fell comfortably into the power structure. That was largely due to her workhorse nature, as she seemed to have a really excellent work ethic, repeatedly saying that she preferred being on the island to her job driving a truck in Chicago. So much of her story is focused on the rise and fall of her relationship with Kelly, with her opening up and saying she felt like Kelly was a sister to her. Then, when the tribes merge, she loses Kelly to the Pagong girls. It really hurts her feelings in a way that I don't think the show really gets into. If I were a story producer, I would have asked her, how does it make you feel when you see Kelly with the other women? Her best moment is yet to come on the season, which I'll talk about later in the episode. As a kid, I always found Sue to be really entertaining and likable. Following Colleen's vote out, I feel like 12-year-old me was rooting for Sue for that 2-episode stretch. She's a really tough player to analyze because yes, she comes back for All-Stars, but doesn't really get to play, and she kind of disappears off the face of the earth. She went to the 10-year reunion where she looked pretty much the same. I'd be really curious what she's up to now. On this season, she was an underrated player. She's in the dominant alliance and is completely playing the Pagong women, giving them hope for a women's alliance around the time of the merge, which really helps the Pagongs to stay disorganized. In my opinion, she's the most entertaining on this cast, often unintentionally. I'm glad they found her. After Sue's departure, Jeff shows up in the dead of night to pull them. The way I would cuss this man out, you know it's about to be a long ass day and some bullshit when someone wakes you up at 5 a.m. And some bullshit it proves to be. They have to take a trip down memory lane past their fallen comrades' torches and reflect, then walk over hot coals that are burning at 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. Excuse the fuck out of me. Before it all begins, they have to cover themselves with mud from the mud volcano. So they get to the rite of passage, reflecting on each and every survivor, which I love and wish they would bring back just once for old time's sake. They spell both Sonia and Stacy's names wrong on the torches, which is embarrassing. They walk across the hot coals, which does look cool, and get to their final challenge, hands on the immunity idol. They need to keep their hands on the idol as long as they can. The last person standing will be in the final 2 and choose their finalist's opponent. So they get started. After 2 hours, Jeff comes out to seduce them with an orange.
Take a whiff. Take a whiff.
They smell.
Oh, you don't know what these oranges smell like. Permeate your soul.
I'm thinking oatmeal, Jeff.
30 minutes later, Rich makes a speech that he feels like he's never going to outlast Kelly and just drops out of the challenge. At this point, Rich basically knows that he's going to Final 2, as Rudy would be tough competition for Kelly in a Final 2, and he has a Final 2 with Rudy, so he just lets his oranges permeate on his soul. Rich and Jeff have a conversation on the sidelines where Rich highlights that Rudy gave Rich his word to go to Final 2. Eventually, Rudy slips up and takes his hand off, and Kelly wins her 4th needed individual immunity in a row, setting a record for women that to this day hasn't been broken. Back at camp, Rudy tells us he feels like he gave away $1 million when he moved his hand. He feels he had the game sewn up. Rudy pretty much thinks Kelly should take Rich because he doesn't think anybody will vote for Rich in the final 2. They head to tribal council where talk is all about Kelly's decision. Jeff just talks at Kelly, calling her queen of the island, no questions asked. This is the only word spoken in front of the jury at this tribal council by a player.
The good news is...
So Kelly goes to cast her vote, and that one vote goes to Rudy. So we say goodbye to Rudy here, who's probably the most complicated person to discuss on a rewatch 25 years later. Rudy starts the season on the Tagi tribe, the oldest person on this cast at 72, and they in 46 seasons will only cast someone older than that one time, and that's Rudy again when he's 75 in All Stars. His tribe mates see him as grumpy and curmudgeon-y, which provides funny TV moments, but the Tagi see bigger fish to fry as they have bigger physical liabilities and annoyances on their tribe, and they see Rudy as extremely loyal, an asset to their budding alliance. They also respect him because he's a veteran. I looked this up. Rudy was a veteran of World War II, the Cold War, and Vietnam War. I think the show really dropped the ball of telling his story. The elephant in the room is the amount of clips I had to put into this video of Rudy expressing his views on certain things, especially his view and relationship with Rich. As I said, I respect Rudy, someone of this age at this time in the year 2000 when gay marriage is not legal in a single state. There's no framework to be having these conversations or to be having this friendship with Rich on TV despite acknowledging that his homophobic friends back home are going to hate it, especially with Rudy being a career military guy. During his and all of his friends' time in the military, gays were banned from joining. He obviously really does like Rich, no matter what he says. Rich also has a background in the military that they don't talk about, but I'm sure that Rich spoke about that with Rudy, that I'm assuming helped build the bond with Rudy. Rudy would go on to vote for Rich to win and be lifelong friends with him after the show. It was progressive for him to be publicly friends with Rich, but obviously some of these comments just don't age well and would not fly in modern day. This was just such a big storyline of the season, and I tried to handle it with care while also doing my job. Rudy and the Tagis make it to the end, and it's heavily implied that Rudy would have won the money. He was a really lovable guy, and his life story really did deserve $1 million. He would continue to be active with the Navy community and pass away in 2019. His uniform is on display at the Navy SEAL Museum in Florida. Back to the game. The following day, the final 2 reflect on their time in the game. Kelly does yoga and has a lot of regrets. She regrets joining the Alliance and working with Sue. Rich is trying to keep his head in the game.
I intend to stay completely out of the sun and try and do nothing.
Kelly cries over her regrets, and they burn their whole camp, which seems to act as therapy for Kelly. So they head to final tribal council. With some commentary from jurors, Sean feels like the final two need to face the music for their actions. Jervis is clearly rooting for Kelly for winning challenges and her gameplay. Rudy says he liked Rich the whole time, that he's smart, he got them through the whole time. Greg accuses Kelly of having an identity crisis. Colleen says she just wants to go home. Jenna is proud of herself for not lying. The real juicy confessional is from Sue, who is literally licking her lips, tantalized, waiting to give her final speech.
I got both guns loaded, and I'm gonna fire them full blast.
At Tribal, Jeff reminds them that the runner-up gets $100,000. The winner gets a Pontiac Aztek on top of the $1 million. They don't talk about the runner-up money anymore, but that's a lot of money. They should still mention this. It's nice. Jeff congratulates the cast for making it to the end, and they start their initial arguments.
Nope. Nobody has taken anything personally. I haven't, or I don't know that I necessarily haven't taken anything personally. I've tried not to, or I hope we're not going to be judged on how we chose to play the game. I'm hoping what we're going to be judged on is the person that I am, the conversations that we had, the time we spent together.
I take a little bit of a different approach to it. My approach to the game was one of strategy from the beginning. For me, instead of who's the better person, it is about who played the game better.
I found these initial arguments interesting. The finalists asked the jurors to make a decision between character and strategy. This jury is going to make a split decision. Kelly perceives herself as the better person, yet half the jury actually would say Rich has better character than Kelly. And Rich claims he has better strategy than Kelly, but Jervis thinks Kelly's a genius. Rich says he regrets his weaknesses and blind spots in the game, and Kelly says she regrets being in the Alliance. When Jenna asks who should be in the final two instead of them, Rich says Rudy and Greg, pandering to the jury. Kelly says Sonia and Gretchen, two people who aren't present, which is such a bad answer. Of course, there's gotta be this.
Your FNF idea, the Fat Naked idea, is extraordinarily funny. Fat Naked $1 million is even funnier.
How is this okay? Kelly starts talking about faith and Sue is seething. Rich tells Colleen his strength is observation. Colleen heckles Rich because he knew nothing about them in the trivia game. Greg briefly asks Kelly and Rich to choose numbers between 1 and 10. And finally, Sue gets her chance at the mic.
This island is pretty much full of only two things: snakes and rats. We have Richard the snake, who knowingly went after prey, and Kelly, who turned into the rat that ran around like the rats do on this island, trying to run from the snake. I feel we owe it to the island's spirits that we have learned to come to know, to let it be in the end the way Mother Nature intended it to be, for the snake to eat the rat.
The rats and snakes speech is probably the best part of the entire season. Sue had no right to end Kelly in such a manner. They let Sue go on for 3.5 minutes uninterrupted. This was the real water cooler talk the next day. Sue ate with that. We don't get moments like this in the current tribal council format, which is a damn shame. The finalists get one last chance to plead their case, and Kelly calls Sue a hypocrite. Rich owns his game. They get to voting for a winner, with Jervis voting for Kelly, saying he feels she played the best game. He calls Sue a sore loser and a hypocrite. Sean says he's deciding who is the least objectionable and casts his vote for Rich, again saying this.
His fat naked
Come on. Jeff reads the votes on location, and it's as close as it gets, with Rich winning by a vote of 4-3, getting the votes of the Toggies in Sue, Rudy, and Sean, picking up Greg's vote from guessing a number, even though Greg has said he was always going to vote for Rich. So let's talk about this final two. Firstly, Kelly, who started off in a great spot on Toggy, being probably the only person on Toggy with actual wilderness training, being a rafting guide. Her work ethic shows her value and endears her to Sue, especially compared to Stacy, who Sue hates. Them not liking Stacy makes Sue think that they're besties. The dislike of Stacy might actually be what brings the Toggy 4 together. At the merge, Kelly gets her own subplot because she meets the Pagongs, and she just likes them, gets along with them. They're closer to her age. She bonds with the girls. When she says, "I didn't come here to make friends," you could almost read between the lines as, "I didn't come here to make friends with Sue." The Toggies become so resentful of Kelly. They wanted her out to avoid the situation right here. Kelly wins out and sits in the top two, getting the $100,000 over Sue and Rudy after undermining them at every turn. It all adds up and culminates in Sue popping off at that final tribal. Kelly was kind of playing the game, forming alliances left and right, and saying she didn't come there to make friends, which is kind of badass, but then she's also really wishy-washy about it, not committing to either side, which seems to bother everybody. I think she mostly just wanted to be in nature, and following the show, she would escape into nature. She never watched the show, and would go on excursions on Wednesday nights to avoid seeing herself on it. She expresses gratitude for the experience and does end up coming back. Her run in Second Chances ends up being what I would expect from a return from Colleen. She's still rafting and is raising her son Rio in Northern California. And our winner in Rich, who I found to be such an interesting character this season, joining the Toggies and quickly seeming to just know what he wanted to do on the show from the very beginning. He has confidence, letting chaos ensue as he watches from his tree, like he finds the other competitors funny. As early as episode 1, he's seen taking interest in Sonia on a personal level, showing he was genuinely interested in the other players, and he takes on the provider role, helped by a great knowledge of marine biology, and he uses that as a memorable part of his strategy. He pulls together his alliance as a strong force, though I think he was expecting to be met by slightly stronger opposition from the other side. He really thought the Pagongs were trying to play him at the merge, but was just met with little opposition, and runs his ragtag group all the way through the game. Rich has a really smart mind, but ultimately I don't think he was ever really challenged in a serious way. In the end, he's a bit hard on himself about his game, saying he had blind spots, though he played a really great game. I feel like he's holding himself to such a high standard. I mentioned earlier I was showing all of these clips of everyone saying all of these things about Rich, and he just has to take it the whole time. Sure, he has a smile on his face and laughs along with them, but it takes a really strong, resilient person to do that. Through that, you could tell he just deals with stuff like this in his real life, and for that, he really deserved the $1 million prize. I wish the show would have taken some time to highlight really any of his personal life story, in addition to his sexuality, because in my research, I learned he had all of these previous experiences related to this that would have painted him as more of a human than a character to the viewers at home. Rich quickly shaped the game into a game of strategy and founded so many fundamentals we know today. He was outspoken, opinionated, and unafraid to be himself. Following the show, he would reappear on television and have a public battle with the US government and IRS, and would have a recent return to the spotlight in 2024 with an appearance on House of Villains. Though I don't think we'll see him again on Survivor, I really hope we can see him on The Traitors in one of the next few seasons as a traitor so he can really shine. Thank you to Rich for participating in this video. Check him out on YouTube. He makes really great videos talking about his experiences with the show, his thoughts on current seasons, and just his life in general. I could talk about Rich all day, but tried to edit myself down. Let's get to episode 14, The Reunion, which weirdly starts off with no introductions and immediate interrogative questions to Rich, telling Rich that America basically didn't want him to win. And Kelly, you were close but no cigar. Kelly and Sue say that they squashed their beef. Sue looks stunning. After they resolve all that, Bryant Gumbel finally introduces himself. I always thought his name was Bryant Gumball, but whatever. Where is Jeff? Bryant tells us they're doing scientific polling while they're on the air. Ooh la la. Bryant is also recreating the look every kid dons when borrowing the glasses from a household decorative Santa Claus. They introduce the cast. The audience doesn't seem excited to see anyone besides Colleen, and we get right into the usual fare from Sean.
He's Darth Gator. That's what we've been calling him.
Things get spicy and real when Rudy calls Joel a chauvinist. Jervis doubles down calling Joel a chauvinist, to which Joel's comeback is roasting Jervis for either how many kids or girlfriends he has. On Rudy, Rich adamantly defends Rudy, saying he comes from a different generation, but he's an amazing man. An audience member asks a really dumb question: are any of you ever gonna eat rice again? Are you kidding me, lady? Colleen and Greg deny a romantic connection, and Rudy really shines at this reunion, owning his sense of humor and showing that he has a good heart. The results from the live poll come in, where America overwhelmingly voted for Rudy to win. Crazily, 51% of America said they wouldn't have done what Richard did to win. We get a sneak peek of Survivor Australian Outback, which I guess I'll cover one day if there's any interest in that. Overall, this season has been a joy to rewatch, seeing all the things we now know and love develop for the first time. I started this project as a weekly challenge, as a reward for hitting 500 subscribers, and my channel has changed so much since then. I want to thank everyone who's been there for a long time or a short time, and hope to make more videos like this in the future, but it takes a lot of work, so if you want to see more like this, give me a like, comment, subscribe. If this video ever gets 500 likes, I'll do season 2. Until then, you know where to find me. Bye!